Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Spider-Man Brand New Day. I'm going to go out of my way to say that if you are to try to avoid all of the spoilers of this film because you want to wait X number of days to check it out, by all means, go out of your way to a mobile device right here and now with a Google Play Store, check out apps Zelifonic, Zelivonic, or Clede Plus, Klede Plus. You'll be able to watch this movie right here and now. Avoid all the spoilers and be happy that you were to have gone on at least got a gist of this movie. And then, whenever you two have gone on to turn around into the theater and watch it at your convenience, go ahead and do so. And also, you avoid my opinion of this entire movie whatsoever. Me blabbing and talking about how I felt about this piece. You can watch this piece on your own via the convenience of your own home. But at the end of the day, it's time for me to say, let's talk about this. So, if anything, my honest thoughts about this film is in a weird, wild direction of things. I'll go on to say for Spider-Man Brand New Day that this is a good to solid good movie. Like, I think that the newer Spider-Man or the newer Superman was better than this, but it doesn't feel that way, like, grading wise of this film. Also, I feel that this movie feels more like the newer Captain America film than it does anything of like the other Tom Holland Spider-Man films. This movie is to kind of feel like there's no more Spider-Man stories to tell. So it's just filling an MCU quota, which is weird to me. Like, it's reminding you, hey guys, you know that whole saga thing that we're really focusing on? Guess what? We're going to focus it again here. This movie honestly feels like a pit stop to Doomsday. So, really, that's all you should be really caring about is just that Doomsday movie. The Spider-Man film is just a thing that exists. But still, I am to go on and say that this movie is still a thumbs up film. I was to go on and like quite a bit of moments in this film because it reminded me of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films, kind of almost shot for shot at some points. But the big supposed selling points to this movie, I will go on and explain to you their value of how they're to go on and go about in this film. So first off, Spider-Man is going through a mutation of his powers in this movie, and he's kind of turning feral like Wolverine is to have turned feral in X-Men 97 Season 2. Spider-Man is getting mutated, and you would think that he would turn into Man-Spider, like in the comic books, or in the 90s animated series, or any other iteration of Spider-Man eventually that goes on into Man-Spider, which is this creature of a thing that usually he has extra limbs, and it looks kind of weird and freaky. This movie goes on and gives Spider-Man black eyes and goes on to make him a little bit more edgy, like he kind of has like blackouts of like rage blackouts. But really also besides a certain thing that happens to Tom Holland's character that brings in an addition to this film, which I won't go on to explain right here and now. I will explain at some point much later. It's not the Man Spider. It's not. Like, it's not a full on transformation, mutation, fully. No, it doesn't get there, which absolutely freaking sucks. Also, we go on to have the villain of this movie that has no attachment to a Spider-Man rogues gallery or has any connection to of a Spider-Man film of prior. It's just something that they just plop down here and force you to realize, oh, this is the villain? Like, okay, but like, I guess I can enjoy the ride of this adventure of story, but like, I hate the fact that they're just going on and doing something much more for the MCU than they're doing for Spider-Man. Strange. So, we also go on and have Peter that's kind of being a loner here, which I actually really like. Dark, brooding, with a little bit of the edge that's kind of coming with the old man spider thing, but not good enough. We'd go on, and of course, immediately in the trailer, start to realize that like there's going to be no Doc Connors in this film. We're going to bring in Bruce Banner to talk about the whole mutation thing, and then like we have to go on and also remind our viewers that the Tobey Maguire movies exist way too often within this film. We really do. Yeah, if it's not the tally ho or uh the almost like I have the power of the sun at the palm of my hand, and then oh my neck. Yeah. Um yeah, we're going on and getting some flavoring of past Spider-Man films in this one. So now we're going to go on and talk about the characters that we know through trailers and such are in this movie. So, Scorpion, Hulk, and Punisher. So let's talk about Scorpion. So we go on, or we can also, I guess, talk about the Hand, because they were in the trailers too. We also have another villain that's a cameo that I'm not going to talk about now that I thought was cool that he was in there, but he was in there for so freaking briefly that it doesn't really help the film with the brief appearance. Also, Scorpion. Yeah, like, we get this character, but there's no care about how he gets the suit. He just appears to get defeated, and then there's like the whole runaround of getting Scorpion in this movie. Yeah, like, I just feel so bad that, like, man, I'm sure somebody out there waited forever for Scorpion to be in a Spider-Man film just for him to really just get used like this. Man, that has got to be just a slap in the face to anybody that likes Scorpion in the Spider-Man Rogues of Gallery. Also, we then have the Hulk. I've already kind of explained a little bit of, like, basically Bruce Banner is to be the Dr. Connor's replacement here, and they kind of troubleshoot to kind of use what Banner has gone on to talk about in the past of certain things of how he's to have tried to figure out the Hulk situation and kind of reincorporate it here. But anyways, Hulk is to or Banner and Hulk, like, yeah, it's interesting to have them in this project, and it delivers a really fun action scene within this film that has another kind of character play and there's a bit of fun there. And we'll get to that character here shortly. And I guess they're really just pushing the agenda of like, hey guys, here's where we can go on and give you a better Hulk in the future, but not really enough here. So Hulk is good here. Hulk is entertaining. And it's also just kind of like, man, I wish we could have had more. Like, but obviously, yeah, we aren't going to get that. Then we have the Punisher. So the Punisher just kind of keeps plopping down here and there. He's a character that is very similar to Spider-Man, and also it's kind of funny for Frank Castle to be playing with Spider-Man, who keeps his identity secret throughout this whole entire film. And when we have other MCU additions in this film that I won't talk about right now, it's so funny how Spider-Man is consistently trying to conceal his identity to everybody, and that's the fun part about this film. Uh, so now I'm going to go on and I'm going to push into start talking about a little bit of things that were to put in this movie, and then I'll start to get to the point of like, hey, we're going to get to some characters that weren't talked about in the trailers, and we're going to kind of start to twist and turn into a little bit of spoilers. But anyways, of course, Ned and Mary Jane are to be known to be in these trailers. So, honestly, Peter going on and re-interacting with these characters, it's interesting because of how awkward and how just weird it is that he kind of reinserts himself back into their lives. And then he has to go on and kind of protect them and save them and whatever. But then eventually it gets to a point where Peter just kind of wants to go on and tell these people who he is in his own way, and it kind of starts to become very lazy how that goes about. And that is a very weak point of this film. That's where things start to get very boring in this film and bog it down for a 2-hour runtime. I'm like, you could have done something way more interesting here. Because if anything, a lot of the villains are very much throwaway in this entire film. So, now, cryptically still, for the main villain. The main villain in this story feels very much like Sentry was in the Thunderbolts film. This person is a big, bad, scary villain, but also, it again has nothing to tie into the Spider-Man world. It also is to be a villain that it's like, they go on and they tease so much of it to the point to where when it's finally revealed of what this character really is, it's like, I really could just not care at that point. Because it's like, okay, you've done all this bouncing around, and it's kind of getting to the point to where when you finally reveal who it is, I'm not going to care anymore because this person has been through so many other people that when you finally give the reveal to me of who this person is, I'm really not going to care. I'm really not. And then also when the reveal happens, I'm like, this fucking sucks. And so yeah, I was kind of just like, what is this? Like, why? I hate this. I hate this. Give me more of it. It's kind of like the Data scene where he goes on and he goes to the bar and he drinks the drink, and Whoopi Goldberg looks at Data. It's like, yeah, it looks like you really hated that. And he's like, yeah, I do. Give me more of it. Yes, please give me more. Because we're not doing anything else in this film, so I just have to go on and at this point just be like, okay, like, let's just keep dancing around with this bouncing ball of character, because, Like, you're not giving me anything else, movie. Um, you're stretching this movie so much so within your 2 hour runtime that I'm like, man, this movie does not feel productive enough. And then we go on and we get the Shield replacement characters in this film, which is to go on and be characters we've alluded to in prior uh, Spider-Man Tom Holland films, which of course is Damage Control. So Spider-Man will go on and make his way finally to Damage Control and start to talk about things here and there to them, about what his case that he's currently working on. And they're going to keep talking about a very specific thing that will keep coming up. That's to be some kind of acronym to something, or to think that it's supposed to be some weird, goofy alien weapon of a thing, to eventually have it be revealed later what it is, which is absolutely nothing to give a about. Because of course it doesn't, because this movie should eventually be nothing at some point to give a about. Even though you could like it, it's not something you're probably going to remember after a certain point of time, or even a couple of months from now, when eventually Doomsday becomes a thing. You're going to forget all about this film and eventually realize that Doomsday is the only thing you're probably going to care about, if you even can care about that film. Because I'm sure that movie is going to be way too much buildup and maybe not a good enough payout. I'm not quite sure yet. I'm kind of having my hedges kind of, I'm kind of like, man, are they going on? Are they having Doomsday exist to just kind of build to another bigger film like Secret Wars? Because for the life of me, like, I can't think that this Doomsday won't feel exactly like Infinity War, to me, in my opinion. So let's go on and let's finally get to the spoiler parts, and then we'll get to the full breakdown of the film. So, the spoiler parts of the film, for those of you that have gone on to see this movie or know what's going on anyways, because everybody kind of does. Really? Come on. So, let's get into the bigger spoilers. So, we'd come to find that in this film, we're continuing the agenda of the, spoilers everybody, X-Men Mutant Saga within this film. Because who gives a crap about Spider-Man Rogues Gallery? I would have liked Ned to have become Hobgoblin, but obviously, like, while I was watching Peter watching Ned on the social medias, I'm like, well, obviously that's not going to happen. Like, he's still a nice guy, Ned. We're not going to see some evil maniacal plots going on here with this character. It's just not going to be a thing. He's still a nice guy. So then I was to go on and find out who the villain is in this film, and it ends up being none other than Jean Grey. I'm like, God dang it, how many movies at this point do we have to go on and have Jean Grey become the villain of? But on top of that, like, how does Jean Grey fit into this story? How does this work? Is it just that, like, they really wanted to have this, like, idea of, like, man, wouldn't it be cool if an X-Men fought against a technically Avenger, which is Spider-Man, but he's not really a full-time one, but, so, yeah, like, they just put that, I guess, in people's minds to just be like, well, yeah, an Avenger versus an X-Men, technically. No. No. yeah, like, this doesn't fit in the Tom Holland Spider-Man world. And then basically this character who is Jean Grey turns around and instead of fighting Spider-Man, instead eventually turns around and is fighting against Damage Control, because that is who the real villain is in this story. We come to find that Damage Control are just be kind of like a bunch of characters that all just hate mutants anyways and want to figure out to nullify or use their powers as their kind of own gain and what have you. But also, I don't even know why when Bill goes on and nullifies Jean Grey's powers, how he's just like, well, like, that's the win for us, and he walks off. No, Bill wants to go on and test Jean Grey's powers and lets her fully go on and use them. And I'm like, are you stupid? Are you the dumbest man on the goddamn planet? Like, you want to let her go on and unleash her power. And also, here's the thing. Jean Grey may be powerful, but, like, she doesn't straight up turn into the Phoenix at any point in this film either. Like, there seems to be a teasing of that, but really also, we don't get to taste the Phoenix. So, that kind of is to just suck. Because I'm just like, okay, so, like, is this Jean Grey Phoenix? Or is this just Jean Grey with kind of an almost Xavier level power? Because obviously, if you have watched Logan, like, and you see what Xavier does to that whole casino, kind of the same thing going on in this film. And then eventually we have Spider-Man that kind of does the weird slow, like, making his way to Jean, and then Jean's like, yeah, like, if anything, my power has increased. And then Spider-Man's like, oh, well, like, I have a way of taking you out myself. And no, it's not his man's spider powers. It's his brain power. Yeah, that's stupid. So, but if anything, we have to find our characters that can relate to one another, because that's what we're doing in MCU films. We have to have a villain and a hero that has to, like, relate to one another. And again, this has to be in a very century century way of approach from the Thunderbolts. So yeah, so with that said, yeah, this movie, there's good things about it, and also there's things that really just piss me off. But of course, there has to be that well balanced of mixed feelings. But either way, I could say that I've talked about this movie. I've reviewed it fully, so I think it's about that time to go on and fully break down this entire film bit for beat, slice and dice, go on through this whole rigmarole, through scene for scene, blow for blow, because, that's what I try to do. Hopefully this will be one in a very condensed down version, under 2 hours, because that's what I'm at least trying to do. So believe me, I'm going to rush through this bad boy as much as I can. So if you want every single scene for scene, second to second detail, you may have lost that here. But if anything, I'm going to go on in a lot of ways, fully describe a lot of things going on in this film you may not hear anywhere else. So with that said, I'm going to go on, I'm going to pause here, and I'll get out everything that I need to get out to cover and talk about all of the spoilers of this film. So give me that time. I'll come back here in a second. So I'll be back. Alright, spoil time. It's about the time to spoil this movie. Let me know in the comments below your thoughts upon this film. Maybe if you want to go on and talk about the spoilers of it. Go into hopefully saying right out of the gate spoilers, and then say whatever you want. I'm sure there's not going to be a huge number of comments that are to be down in the comments below. So, whatever your thoughts, if you feel drastically different than I did, if you were to be like, no, this is the bomb diddy-o, this was the best Spider-Man movie I've ever seen in my life, what are you talking about? And I'll be like, okay, you can have that opinion. Like, I want to refute you of that. Also, I don't think I even talked about the Hand. The Hand are characters that are just foot soldiers, and like, I would have thought they would have had way more significance for how the trailer was pushing them so god dang much. And then we go into this movie and they're just another clickbaiting device, making us assume that maybe Daredevil is going to be in this film, which he wasn't at all. And really, it just goes on to have us come to find that the Hand just gets incorporated into damage control. And I was like, has the Hand gone on to look anything like this in any of the other projects that we've seen? But even that, I'm like, the Hand is put in here as just another MCU Easter egg and nothing more. It's just for someone, for Spider-Man to beat down or come up with a way to like figure out how to outsmart. But yeah, it's really just to say that like Spider-Man really is gonna have a problem with the Hand. Really? No. Like, I'm sorry, I would not believe on my best day that Spider-Man is gonna get outsmarted by the Hand. I hate to break it to anybody. I don't care what psychic power that Jean Grey is gonna give them. Yeah, no. So, anyways, let's get into the spoilers of this movie. So, the beginning of it shows that Peter is working on some new web shooters. Because obviously that's the big seller of this movie. Hey guys, yeah, look at these brand new web shooters that look all flashy and cool. And like stuff to be just kind of attached to these to this costume to look different because we have to sell new web shooters every time we do these things. So here's where Peter is consistently stalking Ned Leeds' social medias and watching these videos. There will be times where it seems that Ned probably doesn't go on and have people really watch these, and you could tell because Ned is to go on and do these social medias, and all of a sudden he's with MJ, and then MJ's like, well, hey, one person is actually watching your feed, and they're like, hey, one person, whoever you are, because they never comment. And yeah, like Peter going on and just like continuing to watch this guy is just because like he was a really good friend to him and like he wants to know what's going on in his life. And also he technically doesn't really know this Ned Leeds, which is kind of really interesting. So we have Peter that goes on and finds out that there's a crime being committed. He goes to this this rooftop and webs up all of these thugs. And here, so early in this film, is them just trying to pay homage to a Spider-Man comic book cover with the whole like guy over the shoulder and Spider-Man swinging in the air. So all this movie is trying to do is to try to basically create posters for it and is to give people, hey guys, remember the greatest hits of Spider-Man, instead of creating a actually good Spider-Man movie. They just aren't. Even though this is good enough, it's just like, what are we doing? So we then cut to D Wolf, who is to be the detective that is working alongside Spider-Man. And They end up doing the same thing in the video games, where eventually they did the whole like spider cop thing, and Peter is working alongside this detective that I don't think has the exact same name as this, uh, but if anything, is very similar. So, Spider-Man webs up these thugs and then goes on to make his way to get these flowers. Consistently, Spider-Man is always buying flowers. It kind of gets to the point where it's a little bit weird how he keeps bringing these flowers into these scenarios. But if anything, the main reason why that Peter is buying these flowers is to consistently give them to his aunt's grave. And then we have at some point in this movie see a montage of Peter keep going to his aunt's grave, a lot of time passing, and Peter having not much to do with his life because he's so alone, and it's sad. So we also have a woman that keeps passing by Peter, and we think that she's going to hold some importance to this film. Like, she goes on and she speaks to Peter in this elevator, and like the whole time we're thinking, like, is she going to be some secret Easter egg of a character that's going to get revealed as like some weird, like, Silver Sable character or something down the road, like how in Captain America Winter Soldier, even the neighbor of Captain America was all of a sudden um, eventually down the road to be a viable character to the Marvel story of things as the God, what is it, the broker, the one character. Eventually she became more important in Falcon and Winter Soldier, but if anything, yeah, uh like she was basically just related um to the girl who Agent Carter, she was related to her. So anyways, we cut to Spider-Man, who is to have made his way from one place to another, uh to buy this kind of area that was to kind of be the studio to kind of do these experiments. So here's where we cut to see Spider-Man just taking down these random villains for brief points in this film. Like, we'd go on to have Scorpion, who Spider-Man is facing off in the winter or in the snow, and Scorpion is going on and like slinging Peter with his tail, but eventually Spider-Man does go on and find this piano in this truck and webs the piano, grabs the piano, hits Scorpion with the piano, and takes him out that way. We then go on and find that Spider-Man is getting choked out by none other than Tombstone in this movie. I'm like, oh my god, they did Tombstone? And the guy actually looks like the guy from Luke Cage. So I was like, good. They actually did this effing character. And everybody was going on and already telling me that Tombstone was going to be in a Spider-Man content. And I was like, oh, okay, so he'll be in Spider-Noir. But no, they doubled down and they said, no, Tombstone is going to be now in this film. And I'm like, they just did a Tombstone. What are you guys talking about? And then come to find out, yeah, everyone was right. A lot of people were saying that Mephisto and Ghost Rider were going to be in this film. And immediately when they were teasing the point where Belova was talking about that people are possessed, I was like, oh my god, are they really going to go the Mephisto Ghost Rider route in this film? Please, like, man, if only. But then we'd come to find out that these people aren't possessed. It's all Jean Grey using her powers on them. And it becomes this weird thing that she can only hop from people from 33 feet of distance. So that was actually kind of interesting how that worked. Because eventually, once Spider-Man figures it out, he goes on it and kind of gets Jean's possessed person stuck to where they can't hop anywhere. So that was kind of like, all right, like, okay. He figured it out somehow. And he figured it out to like specifics because he just kept going on and kind of matching where the hops were going, and he could easily figure it out. So Spider-Man gets the best of Tombstone, goes on and flings him, and then goes on and webs him. And DeWolf is to go on and tell Spider-Man, "Hey, you're kind of doing my job for me," and Spider-Man kind of goes on and is to and try to like not take all the credit and whatever. So, uh, so more times passing, more gray flowers, and more times where Spider-Man is going against more foes, uh, and thugs, going up against the Hand, eventually getting like the key of the city or something. Yeah, Spider-Man receives key to the city. Yeah, they probably said that already. So, as more that Peter is to watch Ned's live stream, and here's where MJ is to make an appearance. Like, oh yeah, somebody's watching you. Yeah, oh great. Hey, yeah, whoever's watching. Thank you for whoever's watching. Uh, so we consistently have DeWolf and Peter who are having these discussions about like where they're kind of going next. And eventually, when Belova comes in, they'll talk about, oh yeah, like Belova is really stepping up and she's helping us out. Oh, okay, good, well, yeah, yeah, like if anything, they're talking about like the cases that they're working on, and Peter will talk about how he's going on and he's doing some stuff with cameras to try to face scan to try to find people like Scorpion or trying to find um, Jean Grey and be able to track them down. And DeWolf is like, "Hey, you're kind of doing that illegally," and but she's like, "Well, hey, don't tell me about it. Like, just keep doing it anyways." I kind of honestly would have wished in this Spider-Man world we would have finally went with the Spider Bots. When they started to do that in Superior Spider-Man, I'm like, "Oh my god, this is so cool." I honestly wish that they would do that in this Spider-Man world. Give me the little Spider-Man bots. Like, you could have really have sold that. You could have made that a merchandising thing. But no, like, you're not gonna do that bullshit. Like, that is a merchandising gold mine. You could have gone on and had a number of people buy a number of those things, but you're not pulling the trigger to do it. What's stopping you? Like, is it just a CGI thing? Come on. You could do some really interesting things with the spider bots too, but they're not doing it. So we'd go on to have Peter that is making his way to this place to get some more flowers and is going on and kind of thumbing and doing some groceries. Then all of a sudden he gets a 911 call to go on and be trying to catch this kind of runaway tank, which eventually will bust its way through this prison because it's trying desperately as possible to get Scorpion out of it. So we'll come to find in the tank that we're thinking that somebody's going to be important inside of it, and it's just going to be this random woman that's in this tank. So I'm like, okay, this sucks. So as Peter is chasing off onto this tank, he jumps in this car, and this car is turning to Spider-Man. He's like, "Oh, hey, man, yeah, I'll help you out." So he like just starts driving as crazy as he can, and Peter all of a sudden loses his, weirdly his web shooters kind of disconnect from his wrist, so he has to kind of reobtain them. I think at some points also, or no, wait. Peter goes on. This isn't the point where he loses the web shooters. This is where he throws the web grenades, because that's the technically new thing with this Spider-Man character is now we have web grenades. Because here's where we really have to go on and push the extension of Spider-Man's webbing. Because in this movie, we're having Spider-Man getting organic webbing, and not the way like the comic books where it's weird, like he goes on and he kisses this web woman and all of a sudden becomes like a pregnant version of himself, and he gets into a cocoon, and then like he like yeah, it's very weird and very strange how they get organic webbing for Peter in the comic books. It's a strange tale, believe me. um like how they go about it. Like, I don't know if Peter gets pregnant or he ends up just kind of cocooning himself. It's either one way or the other. Like, he ends up kind of rebirthing him. It's strange. Uh, how it all goes about. Um, anyways, so pushing on. So we have at a point where Peter has to go on and redirect the tank, and eventually he smacks onto a bus, and eventually Peter does fall, and when he gets back up, he gets rammed by this van that ends up being to have the Punisher in it. So I'm like, wait a minute, like this is how they just randomly introduce this character, which I guess could like I think that could make a lot more sense in the MCU. But as a story, it's like, yeah, we really just didn't care. Like we just really want to just have this character just to plop in out of nowhere. Um so I positive and negative about it. I'm kind of, but I think that this is a good idea, like to just have these random interactions rather than it feeling like it all feels very planned. Um, and then shots fired by the later part that also is gonna feel like, wait a minute, what? Like anything could happen, and then ultimately we just find that that whole thing really doesn't do enough of good in this film. Um, but we'll get there. So, so Spider-Man and Frank are bickering, and they keep bringing up about the whole like uh this one mission that the two of them are on, and how like Peter had to save him, and like this basically becomes like the Budapest uh incident from Widow and Hawkeye. Like this is that whole thing all over again. So anyways, what eventually does transpire here is that eventually Frank gets knocked out of his car, and eventually as Frank is now upset and tries to cuss, all of a sudden Spider-Man shoots a bit of webbing in his mouth. So it's like, oh yeah, we're trying to censor characters now. So D Wolf is getting on the case here. So D Wolf is telling Peter, hey, you better get onto that tank. Hey, you better go on and you better get to him before he breaks into this prison. And Peter's like, hey, I'm trying to get to it. I'm desperately trying to get to it. So eventually what happens is Spider-Man tries to web up the tank to where the tank goes flinging into the prison regardless, smashes through it, and then eventually Peter finds out in the tank that it's just this random woman. It doesn't make any sense. So here's where we start to see that Jean Grey's character hops from person to person to person, and they bizarrely think that it's a possession of some kind. They think it's a supernatural thing, which is not. But Peter somehow can figure out where the entity is going from, where it's hopping from. He can figure that out. he has some sense at all. I guess for his spider, for his speeder, for his Peter Tingle, the Peter Tingle can go on and figure out where the Jean Grey powers are hopping to next. So it gets to the point where we see some random guard, then some construction worker, then eventually a guy that is telling or leading, because he's one of the guards, where to take Scorpion and telling him, oh no, you guys better go to Belle Reve. So or something like that. He goes to just some other location. So Spider-Man makes his way to the construction guy, and he, of course, has no idea why he's even up there. Then Spidey goes on and sees the guard that is saying, hey, yeah, Peter, come and save me, as he's off of the edge. Peter goes on, or Spidey goes on to web the guard, pushing him back onto the building, then webs him to the building, and at some point, since now Jean can't go on and have much use of this guard, she tries to go on and hop into Spider-Man, which when she goes on and she does that, she realizes that she latches on to some memory, and for some reason Spider-Man somehow is to have some psychic barrier that will not allow him to become controlled, then anyone that tries to go on and tries to go into his mind just gets to this one memory, because it just keeps looping in. So maybe there was that whole Doctor Strange interaction that kind of perfected that. I don't know. Either way, it's kind of just strange how Peter somehow has that psychic block up. But it is what it is. So we'll come to find that that memory is to be of Peter and Aunt May. Eventually we'll come to find that that memory will lead to Aunt May talking to Peter about how dangerous it could be since now he has powers. But eventually it'll go on to talk about how he'll have a great responsibility to do what he needs to do because he has these great powers. And yeah, kind of because we always have to go back to that chestnut now, don't we? Every single time in some goofy iteration of, and we have to bring it up in every single one of these movies all the time. Great power, great responsibility. It always happens. So, but also we have to have Aunt May, like, talk to Peter in a very roundabout way about, yeah, like, things are gonna be dangerous and scary, and at some points maybe you're gonna turn into a monster, but if anything, just remember what I taught you, and with great power comes great responsibility. So, but anyways, so as the Jean powers go back to the guard, eventually there is the, hey, yeah, like, you were to go on and think that I was the most important thing, but if anything, you don't even know what's going on in that tank. So all of a sudden we come to find out that the tank explodes because there's a bomb in it. And I'm like, man, like, they're going in very much Batman Dark Knight direction in this film, which I thought was kind of cool. So next, finally, after Jean has left that guard's mind, and he's now in an ambulance, and he's telling Spider-Man, it's like, hey, I do nothing to hurt you, Spider-Man. I love you, Spider-Man. And Peter's like, yeah, like that guy, or Spidey's like, yeah, that guy's not, like that guy doesn't have Jean within him anymore. So Spidey is going on and talking to Wolf about what he was just to have been witness to, and how like he is to go on and be the only one that can really see what's going on in people. So he has to kind of figure out if there's somebody that he can go on and best know what this could really be. So we would go on to have Spidey needing some intel from a very certain person, and it's not the Punisher. We have that kind of coming a little bit later. So Spidey goes into this weird spa of a thing that, like, I'm like, why is this here? And then all of a sudden we come to find that, like, weirdly, Belova is having a spa day. I'm like, Belova is in this movie, but everything that she's doing has no real significance. She's not suiting up. She's not doing a superhero pose. She's not even fighting anybody in this entire film, but she's here. Like, I guess we have to somehow be like, well, yeah, we kind of get some Avengers in here, but also nothing that really is to be of significance. We're teasing that Belova is maybe naked under that water. So Spiny goes on and gets into his underwear and still has his mask on. And Belova's like, seriously, you're going to still wear that mask? And he's like, yeah. So Belova and Spidey get into the water. And so they start talking about how possibly, as Spider-Man explains what he's been experiencing lately, Belova thinks, like, well, yeah, I think it's some kind of possession. Maybe it's a supernatural thing. And so eventually they start to talk about Team Max and how it seems that that is a thing that, or VMAX, my bad, VMAX. So Belova is like, VMAX? Well, that probably sounds like a alien extraterrestrial weaponized. No, it turns out it's nothing. It's really nothing. It's a vent that is to have the words Vent Max on it, but some of the words are scratched out and it says V Max. Jean would get that from a premonition that she gets from a prisoner that is in the damage control cell that eventually Jean ends up winding up in, and then looks up to find the V Max on the vent. And so now Jean knows exactly where it is that that last prisoner had died to, because that was their last thoughts. But we'll get to that at some point in this movie of review. So after Spidey goes on and is to really not get any much of really clear intel from Belova, and also Belova is just to say that, like, how sad Peter is or Spidey is, because she doesn't know who he is. And also when Spidey ends up with, like, Ned and MJ later on, Belova's like, oh yeah, Spidey does have friends. Like, I think that is kind of funny. So, because he was so sad before. So, now, since Spidey went to Belova and didn't really get a clear answer from her, Spidey just decides, like, well, hey, since I couldn't get any intel from Belova, I'm going to try and get a second opinion, which is to go to Damage Control and ask them about all this. So Spidey goes into the Damage Control headquarters And they go on and they want to scan him up and down. And then they also want to have him take off his mask. And he's like, no, 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 no. Like, I'm not going to take off my mask. I'm not going to reveal my identity to you. And then the guy named Bill comes in, who we eventually come to find out in the comic books is to be kind of like a Stryker character, where he's kind of secretly against the mutants and wants them to be killed anyways. Yeah. Like, we'll come to find out a lot of guys in Damage Control don't really like mutants all that well either. So we're gonna find out that, like, anyone in Damage Control, like, I don't think I'd trust them that well. They're all bad guys in their own ways. So, Bill takes Spidey on a tour of Damage Control, and eventually here's where he tells us that the Hand have actually become allies to them. But eventually later on in the film, they'll go on and they'll fight Spidey again because they'll be under mind control of Jean Grey, and then Spidey will face off against the Hand again. And that could go on to be an interesting part of the film, but also it's Spider-Man facing off against the Hand. It's just more lackeys that he should be able to easily defeat, as well as anybody else in this entire movie, with the regarding of also just, ooh, Jean Grey, that's kind of a more of a threat, but also, like, when you look at threatening characters of the X-Men group, do you merely turn to Jean Grey every single time? like, yeah, she's the Phoenix, then hell yeah. But if she's not so much. Like, if anything, you go on like, man, that Cyclops guy, or that Wolverine guy, like, you're thinking that you should probably be going on and seeing Wolverine in this movie more so than anybody else. But yeah, we just don't get there. Wolverine would have been a heck of a lot more cooler in this film, but it is what it is. Plus, also, like, how can you really buy, like, Jean Grey being a villain in this story? You can much more buy than you could Wolverine. And then also, like, Wolverine being a good guy in the last Deadpool movie, and now all of a sudden he's a bad guy. Yeah. Anyways, so we also come to find that they had snapped up Shocker's tech. If you guys don't remember, in the Homecoming film, Shocker was a villain, and then they kept flopping of who Shocker was, and they had basically commandeered his tech, and they're figuring out ways to best use it. But really, what they go on and they do here is just have Spidey, who at some point takes the Shocker gauntlet, and is to try to use it against Hulk, but also come up with a new nullifier for Hulk's powers. Because it's to be a nullifier that completely wipes out all the power that's inside of anybody. And at some point, Spidey was going to try to use it on Jean, but also it's like, well, yeah, Hulk could probably seem also like a pretty viable option to want to use it also with him. But it just seems to be a thing that just doesn't quite work. But eventually we'll get there. So, Spidey and Bill go on and they start talking. And so, whoever this new hopping of threat is, supposedly possessing people person to person, it seems that they may want to go on and have a score to settle with Damage Control, and Spidey is to go on and see this big, huge, massive vault and be like, well, hey, maybe it's that thing that they really want to get into. But if anything, that vault eventually becomes a thing for Damage Control to protect themselves from Jean Grey, and that's what really goes on in the film. Like, it's kind of like in one of the X-Men films, I think it's like Days of Future Past, where Nixon is in that kind of underground bunker, and then Magneto kind of rips it out, and then has Mystique try to, like, pull a gun on Trask. that whole kind of scene is it kind of feels like that in a way. But pushing on here. So, kind of re-going back into the whole X-Men category of trying to figure out how to reconnect things with all the X-Men and Marvel and MCU films I've ever seen in my life. Moving on. So, because I'm sure they're all going to freaking connect at some point, right? We're basically going to go right back to probably bringing in either the first class of people, or we're going to bring this new batch of X-Men people. We're going to have to freaking just do that now, because X-Men reboot is seemingly happening, and everybody has to be hedging their bets on who's going to be the new Who. Anyways, so Spidey goes on and asks Bill what VMAX is, and Bill's like, I've never heard of that. And eventually, when Jean goes on and asks Bill about the VMAXing, it's like, man, you're the second person that's gone on to ask me about that, and I have no idea what you're talking about. And then Vent, oh, the answer, and then yeah, it becomes nothing. It's stupid. So we have again Peter that's going on and talking to D-Wolf, and this is again while he's shopping. All of a sudden, here is where Ned is supposed to be going on and shopping in the same store that Peter is in also. Ned goes on and grabs a couple of things and then is to make his way to the counter and is to tell this woman, hey, yeah, it seems you have some, like, energy stuff over there. Yeah, how about you go on and look at this face very well, because don't go on and sell me any of that. But you know what? Also, sell me a couple of them, and then never sell them to me again. Because they're actually very unhealthy for me. So, Peter goes on and watches Ned do all this and starts laughing at him, because it's like, yeah, of course. So, Ned goes on and downs these things, and so Peter goes on and continues to just keep following Ned and following him to this party that he's conveniently having. So Peter starts to go on and make his way into Ned's room to see a Star Wars toy, because of course it's technically a Disney collab property, even though technically the Spider-Man most of the time is to be owned by, of course, Sony. We still have to go on and we still have to say it's like, well, yeah, but everything else from Spider-Man is to be owned by Disney, besides the live-action movie rights. So there has to be some kind of like collab going on here with MCU and Spidey, because that's kind of like the partnership that they've worked. So Peter goes on to eventually find that Ned has a number of newspaper clippings of Spider-Man, like he's been following him his entire life. Eventually, Ned is to say for how many numerous different times that Spider-Man has ever saved him in his life, and Ned has narrowed down who he thinks that Spider-Man is, and one of them is Flash Thompson, which is kind of funny, because eventually Flash Thompson at some points becomes Agent Venom, or eventually he becomes a superhero or somebody down the road. Like, sometimes he becomes Venom, it kind of depends on the story. It also kind of depends how you want to write Flash. But also it's quite interesting how, like, the guy who was Flash, like, did a Scream movie, but he's not here. So I've seen him lately, but I didn't see him in this movie. We also come to find that the teacher that was in those other Spider-Man films is also to be possibly a Spider-Man guy. And, like, obviously you have to kind of keep that guy as a picture here, because technically he was also in the Incredible Hulk film. So that's kind of why they have him as a picture here, because he was in the Spider-Man films. He was also in the Incredible Hulk movie. So that's why you have the picture here of him, because he was in other films as like the pizza guy in the Incredible Hulk film, if you guys don't know. So as Peter and Ned are continuing to talk here about the Spider-Man theories, here's where MJ walks in and starts talking now to this guy. That is to not say that his name is Peter. He comes up with this weird, goofy name. He says like Maynard or something. So eventually, MJ introduces herself, and Peter makes up this name, and eventually they break off. And so Ned is talking to MJ. And here's where this guy slides in, goes on, and starts talking to Mary Jane. And they kiss, and then Peter's like, "Ah, she's with somebody." So Peter eventually leaves the party and continues to swing his web. And so much about this movie was to remind me of Spider-Man No More, or Spider-Man 2. Uh, with how I was expecting, while Peter was to kind of like shoot his web, that eventually it would stop and then he would lose his powers and be like, "Oh, I'm gonna fall!" Like, I was kind of weirdly expecting that, but it didn't happen. So Peter starts running in the rain and shooting his webs, and he has these memories of the times that he was with MJ, or with Ned, MJ, and him, and how they were talking about building their lives together, and how MJ said to Peter, like about him wanting to protect her, regardless if she won't remember who he is, and also that Peter was going to go on and write this whole note out and confess to MJ that she's under a spell, that at some point they were lovers, everything off of this note. But eventually he said, "Hey, I'm Peter Parker, and I'd like a cup of coffee." And MJ's like, "That's it?" And Peter's like, "Yeah, that's it." And he just couldn't say the words from the other film. So, but Peter kept that whole note and kept it somewhere. So all of a sudden, now we have Peter that gets up and starts walking around, and all of a sudden he falls over and he collapses. Because in this movie, we have at a point where he's all of a sudden like touching his arm, and he's like, "Man, my arm really hurts." Like, well, like I guess it's just kind of growing pains, or maybe I just injured myself. So Peter just doesn't think anything of it. Next, all of a sudden, Peter all of a sudden is be grabbing on his arm. He's like, "Oh man, my arm really hurts." And then he falls over and he collapses. And then all of a sudden, the next thing we know, he wakes up in this weird, estranged web cocoon. And then he's falling from this building, and he can't control, like, he doesn't have web shooters. He's like, "Oh no, I don't have web shooters." So I'm like, "Oh crap, I'm going to keep falling and I'm going to injure myself." So all of a sudden, Peter has a web coming out of his arm, and now we realize that Peter is shooting webs organically. And I'm like, "Oh my god, he's straight up Tobey Maguiring right now." Now when we go on and we'll have Tom Holland, who interacts with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, they'll have stuff to talk about. And because I'm assuming everybody is effing saying that Tobey Maguire is going to end up in some superhero movie somewhere down the line, that he's going to come back, and then when he does, everybody can just blow a load and be just so happy that they brought him back. But I just don't think that if he is brought back, I don't think he's going to really be put in a real significant role because we have Tom Holland Spider-Man. Like, I think that would be weird to just push him, Tom Holland, so much to the side to be like, oh no, 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 no. We're gonna go back to Tom Holland, or we're gonna go back to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, and he's gonna be the real Spider-Man here. Because honestly, if they would have cared about Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man so badly, they would have gone on and sequeled his story somewhere. They would have gone on and given you a Tobey Maguire sequel film. They would have gone on and brought back Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, sequeled those movies, and given you Amazing Spider-Man 3 or Spider-Man 4. They would have done any of those, and they did nothing. You got nothing. So, right around the time, like, Morbius came out, everybody was thinking there is going to be some Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield movie to try to be made in that time. And after Spider-Man No Way Home happened, yeah, like, that just completely fizzled out. But there's still just freaking people out there that are just like, Tobey Maguire is going to be in some Doomsday, Secret Wars, 30 other films movie because he exists now, and we just have to keep piping in that agenda that we want him somewhere. And then when it happens, people could be happy. So Peter goes on, shoots this web, but eventually he goes on and he like flings his way into almost getting to a point where he touches on his back, but he doesn't go and be like, oh, my back. No, he doesn't do that because that's Tobey Maguire. So again, harping back to Spider-Man 2. So Toby goes on, or Toby, Peter goes on to slide into this laundromat room with little to no clothes on, and he tells the guy in the laundromat room, he's like, hey, yeah, I live here, and I'm going to go on and grab my clothes and put them on. And then Peter is walking around with clothes that obviously aren't his. There's like a midriff on this tank, and this woman is like, is that my tank top? And Peter's like, no, no, let me hit these buttons and let me get out of here. So Peter goes on to eventually find out that he is becoming mutated with his powers. And so he'll also come to find that his senses will become heightened, and more than likely all of this is queued up by a traumatic event. And it's kind of funny because Eve is going on and asking Peter, it's like, well, have you had a traumatic event lately? Yeah, maybe going on and re-meeting up his friends of the past has kind of been haunting him. Or maybe kind of dealing with this uberly powerful possessed hopping thing is to really be affecting Peter. Maybe Jean Grey going into Peter's mind made him become this feral version of himself, or a savage version of himself, kind of like how Hulk turns into Savage Hulk in this film because of Jean Grey's interaction into Peter's mind. That has to be the case. Plus, if Spider-Man is kind of going on and being on Jean's case, what better way to have Jean throw a wrench into Spider-Man by forcing him to kind of have these weird interactions with all these webbings and kind of making him have a lot of poor judgment and having him have all these headaches and all these just issues of senses and everything. So we now have Peter that is to try to hope that he can figure out a way to still use his web shooters, But he comes to find that he can't use the web shooters and the organic webbing simultaneously because they, in tandem, are trying to work, and they're like, no, 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 no. It's either the organic or nothing. So Peter then goes on to make his way to his rooftop, and here's where we basically recreate almost scene for scene the whole like tally ho thing. So of like go web go Shazam, like they're recreating that whole entire scene. So Peter goes on and shoots his first ever organic webbing as it kind of splurts a little bit from his wrist, but then he finally shoots one off and he gets freaking jostled way back and he like smashes uh, onto the rooftop. But all of a sudden, we now come to find that Scorpion is to get facial recognition, and so now Spidey has to go on, and with this new webbing system of organic, has to figure out how to be able to face off now against this threat of Scorpion with this kind of just handicapped. So, no offense to the actually handicapped. I'm just saying here that he's basically having this issue that is going on and kind of having him to be uh, uh, kind of left unbalanced here. So either way, that just doesn't sound good right after one after the other. But anyways, so he's a little bit off, is what I wanted to say there. So Spidey is going on and doing these organic webs, and he's even smacking into pigeons. It's funny. So as Spidey falls on this roof, he's immediately telling Scorpion, he's like, "Hey man, could we call time out? Like, I'm having headaches, and like, man, this is really bad." And Scorpion's like, "Do you even know who you're talking to?" And Spider's like, "Wait a minute, you're not really Scorpion, are you?" No. Inside Scorpion is actually Jean Grey talking to Spider-Man because Scorpion has an agenda of trying to get to these damage control people. So here is where Spider-Man starts very much turn feral and his eyes turn black. And he goes on, he just stomps a mud hole, figuratively, not literally, into Scorpion, like ripping away his tail, just out muscles him. And almost like it looked like he was like crushing the guy with how he kind of like dropped on him. So Peter goes on and flings Scorpion, webs him up, and then the cops start to come in, and then Scorpion ends up turning back into his normal self. And DeWolf's focus is on that a cop had almost died. And so Peter is to be very apologetic that is to go on and happen. And DeWolf is like, well, yeah, you really hurt that guy. So now we have to have Peter that is getting a handle on his more mutated side. So here's where we cut to Bruce Banner that is now a teacher at some university somewhere. He's a professor. Of course he is. He's Bruce Banner. So wait a minute. So I guess for Banner at this point, because wouldn't still Ross? Well, no, Ross is at some max prison because of Captain America. So yeah, there's nobody chasing after Banner right now. Like, well, like, yeah, because isn't the leader to be arrested? So yeah, like they basically take every single threat that Banner is to have, and they take him out in all one fell swoop. Like this guy legit has absolutely nothing for him to be calling out boo about. Like he is to not be scared of anybody. There is to be no threat against him that is to be legitimate. So man, if they ever go on and they ever try to do a Hulk movie, there's nowhere they can go with it. Because, yeah, like, they've kind of, like, besides maybe, well, like, Abomination was even in She-Hulk. Yeah, like, they've kind of either messed up or they've gone on and kind of ruined everything with Hulk. So, plus, I'm never thinking that they're ever going to go on and do a Hulk movie ever, anyways. It's just not going to happen. It really isn't. But anyways, so I would love it to happen, but I don't think it's never going to. It's just that's the heartbreaking thing. He's always going to be partnered up with some movie somewhere. That's what sucks. Anyway, so Banner is going on and trying to teach physics, and no one wants to hear that. They all want to hear another Avenger story. So, because his student goes on and asks him, it's like, come on, Banner, give us one more story. And Banner's like, yeah, I don't really want to go on, and I want to teach physics. I don't want to go on and do another Avenger story. Come on. Plus, also, a lot of times, Banner was honestly Hulk half the time, so how would we remember everything? But anyways, so as this woman goes on and asks Banner this question about this story, Hulk turns to another student and he is wearing full on Hulk costume and he's saying, Hulk smash! And then Banner's like, yeah, that's the answer right there. And then they kind of cut the class. So Peter makes his way to Banner. So we've had to find out through She-Hulk, because isn't that a great piece of content that we have to just siphon through just to get some Banner stuff? Because of course we do. So if you guys had never watched She-Hulk, you're going to have a little bit of a problem now of understanding Bruce Banner right now in the show. Plus also, there is like a handful of different effing end credit scene crap that he's been in with Miss with Captain Marvel that eventually is to somehow at some point maybe tie into Doomsday, but maybe it doesn't at all really much to tie into Doomsday. If anything, I think a lot more people will probably watch Shang-Chi right now, because what's going on as far as Doomsday is connected with Shang-Chi. And I'm like, cool, like, you can actually justify to me to that character, because I actually, like, I don't think I hated that movie. But also, I don't think I'd be like, maybe I'll have to be tempted to review it. Cause yeah, I'll have to be tempted. Anyways, so Peter makes his way to Banner, and so they start to talk about his nullifier. So as they talk about it, Peter is to say, it's like, well, hey, yeah, like, I have a issue where I want to go on and I want to take a nullifier, but I don't want to completely shut off a person's power. I want to go on and be able to control like a certain portion of their power, and kind of like, it's kind of like dampen things down but not completely take things out. And so Banner goes on, I'm like, well, yeah, like, if you were to go on and try something like that could be very dangerous, but if anything, uh like, yeah, it would be worth trying. It'd be worth you going on and seeing how this works out. So Banner goes on and asks who this kid is, because it's like, well, yeah, you're not really one of my students, are you? And he's like, no. And so he's like, who are you? It's like, Ned Leeds. It's like, that that's pretty funny. Just wait till Banner goes on and finds who Ned Leeds is, and goes on to find out that he's a friend of Spider-Man's. If he goes on, even if he does go on and find him. But anyways, so that whole scene was kind of funny there. Um, so now we have to go on and have Peter run through tests of trying to find out which nullifier will work the best for him. And so Peter gets into his Spider-Man costume and he comes to find that this nullifier in this costume is what's going to malfunction at some point and kind of overheat or something. So Peter eventually will go on and suffer through having his web grenades go off by accident, while he's also struggling with these headaches and these growing pain problems of mutating. So eventually there is to be some random person walking by that we don't think anything of. But then all of a sudden, the more the interactions the two of them have, we come to find out that this is actually to be somehow important. So this person is actually to be randomly start talking to Spider-Man because he's actually to be possessed by Jean Grey. So, and eventually Spider-Man will be like, oh, so you're the possessed person that is randomly talking to me now. So we come to find out that all these people start hopping to person to person to person, because while Peter is busy, or Spidey is busy talking to these people, we'd come to find this hooded character is making their way through Peter's place and finding a very specific cup that has a letter that is to have been made by or made to Mary Jane. So the person goes on and says the whole letter. It's like, wow, like this woman is to really have an effect on you. So that tells me exactly where to strike. We'd go and find that every single Spider-Man villain always attacks at the heart. The heart. Osborn. Yeah. Like, and we always have to have some Mary Jane, or in some other cases, Gwen Stacy, who's always in jeopardy, right? So this is none different in this story. So as soon as Spidey knows that Mary Jane is in jeopardy, we now have this chase going on between Jean Grey possessing people and hopping from person to person to person. And we even have one point where Spidey goes into this wedding and this bride is going on and talking about Spider-Man, and then she jumps to this waiter, and Spidey is going on to tell Eve to track all of the possessed persons and figure out where this person could be jumping to next. So Spidey sees that the last possession is to happen in this person in a helicopter. So Peter webs the helicopter and then goes on and attaches the helicopter, I think, to a crane. And so the crane is to be now so high up and is to have the person riding the helicopter to be able to go nowhere because of the whole 33 feet kind of stopgap. So the helicopter driver is to say to Peter, or say to Spidey, it's like, oh, you figured out my issue that I keep hopping to people. And Peter's like, yep, like I outsmarted you. So Spider-Man goes on to find where Mary Jane is. And Spider-Man is to basically tell Mary Jane, it's like, well, yeah, I can't really explain why you're in danger, but I have to go on and take you with me to a secret place because you are in danger. So Spider-Man goes on and starts to swing around with Mary Jane. And so here is where we come to find that there is this really cool scene And it almost also feels like they're kind of recreating things from the very first original Spider-Man with the whole kiss and the whole like mask thing, but it's not upside down. But uh if anything, Mary Jane is like, you know what, there's probably some reason why you're wanting to go on and protect me. It's because like I'm starting to remember little flashes here and that of my past and how you had always gone on and saved me in all these locations. There has to be a connection between you and and I can't quite figure it out. So Mary Jane goes on and says, like, well, yeah, maybe if we go on and we kiss, we'll figure it out. So as Mary Jane goes on and kisses Spider-Man and says, like, Peter, and all of a sudden it seems like all the memories are going to come swarming back. We all of a sudden come to find that all of this is a trick done by Mary Jane, and she has now hopped into Mary Jane, Jean Grey as, and is playing around with Peter's emotions. So MJ, like, this was a really fun scene, I think, because MJ is now playing the bad guy. Uh, Only have we gone on and ever seen Mary Jane rarely ever play, like, she had gone on to be Hydro Man, or Hydro Woman, I guess, uh, and had, like, superpowers. Or we'd go on and do the whole renewed our vows thing where eventually she becomes her own Spider-Man. But very rarely do we ever have it to where, like, Mary Jane has some kind of thing going on interesting enough with her in this. So now that Jean Grey is inside Mary Jane, man, is she really effing with Peter here. So Jean Grey is going on and be like, okay, well, like, now that I'm inside this woman, like, I'll go and I'll put her in jeopardy, and I'll go on and have her fall off to the ledge. Peter goes on and is to dive after her. And this almost seems so similar to the Gwen Stacy falling scene, but also we'd come to find that Mary Jane fell in No Way Home and Andrew captured her. And I think in my other view, that was the one thing that I did not go on and I didn't talk about, but it happened in that other No Way Home review. So maybe I should probably have gone on and tried to figure out what anything I forgot about that other thing because there was so much going on in that movie. But if anything, also, if I'm probably going to eventually re-review it anyways, because I think I'm probably going to go on and have to either copy and paste some things over on the other channel, just kind of put it over here. I'm not sure. Or I'm just going to go on and just kind of recreate all of those reviews of the past and just have a lot of, because I kind of said that I was going on and going to do everything kind of brand new on here because there's a lot of stuff that's kind of outdated as far as videos is concerned anyways. Plus a lot of the visual stuff on those old videos just kind of suck anyways. So it might be better off to just kind of redo those videos. But it all depends on if anything is really viable. Or if there's just a movie or show that I really love enough to want to re-go back over things. But anyways, so Peter goes on and does the only real save that isn't going to kill somebody, like Gwen Stacy, where her neck snaps back because Peter doesn't go on and do the webbing in the best way. Because what Peter went on and did for Gwen Stacy and how she died is he webbed her and tried to stop her from falling and her neck snapped. Where Peter goes on in here and webs so that he can get closer to Mary Jane and then he grabs her. That is the better technique, which eventually ends up getting used in other places. And so they're kind of harping back onto that, that there is a better way to save Gwen, but also there is clearly to have people who had learned that strategy and used it here. And yeah, I think also we may have had Peter use this on Mary Jane at some points in other films. I'm not quite sure. Moving on. So, as Peter goes on, captures Mary Jane, and is to hope that she's okay, and she is. We then have Jean Grey that's in this car with this driver who is being possessed, and Jean is telling him where to go. So Peter gets a facial recognition of Jean, and so since now Mary Jane is in jeopardy, Spider-Man is going to take Mary Jane to the only person that he knows can probably protect her the best, and that's Frank Castle. So Peter makes his way to where Frank Castle lives, and Frank Castle has all of these traps, these tripwires, and all these goofy things. And Peter has to then go on and figure out how to use all of his powers to try and stop these traps from killing them. And so he uses all his powers to get rid of all these traps. And then Frank comes in. It's like, hey, like, what are you doing here? And so Spidey's like, well, yeah, I brought Mary Jane in here for you to protect her. And Frank is like, I ain't gonna do that. Like no, like I'm not gonna come in here and protect her. And Spider-Man is like, well, hey, I saved you that one time. And Frank is like, well, but that doesn't mean anything. And so Peter is like, well, or so Spidey's like, well, hey, so like if I go on and if I've saved you twice, then you owe me one. So eventually Frank is like, well, hey, all I have is chili. And then they eventually agree that Mary Jane is going to be watched by Frank. And Spidey tells Mary Jane, it's like, hey, don't eat that chili. So eventually there's interactions going on between Spidey, Frank, uh and Mary Jane here. You know what? Hoping if there is a Frank Castle eventually in the future of MCU, you know what? Honestly, I think they should go with the Cosmic Ghost Rider angle. Like, I think if Frank is going to get better used in the MCU, why not give him either powers or make him a war machine? You got to step it up with Punisher. Like, I wish they would have gone on and figured out a way to kind of step things up here. Plus, also with them introducing as Ghost Rider Ryan Gosling, then that can open the doors to like, okay, now we can go on and give all these people kind of Ghost Rider powers, and maybe eventually Frank will go on and get his own kind of Ghost Rider powers. I hope to kind of make his character a little bit more interesting, or even visually interesting. But also, I don't know, like if they're gonna make Frank Castle a CGI like character, I don't know how that's gonna work, but it could be a lot of fun. But it'll probably be very brief in some movie somewhere that probably won't mean a lot. Anyways, so Spidey is trying to go on and try to work on yet another nullifier because his has malfunctioned. And so Spidey ends up asking Frank, hey, do you have any equipment that can go on and help me do a nullifier here? And Frank is like, heck yeah, I have all this equipment. Like, go on and use it. So while Peter takes off his mask, he has Mary Jane sit in this bunker with this sheet to where he can't see him. So Mary Jane asks, or so Spidey asks Mary Jane about a boyfriend because Spidey is to mention about how the two of them had kissed while Jean Grey was taking control of him. So eventually, Mary Jane is to ask if Peter is to have had a girlfriend or a Mrs. Spidey, and Peter says no, but then he also says yes, and then Mary Jane is like, well, whatever happened to her? And he can't go into exact what happened to actually Mary Jane, um, because of course he can. But at some point, what will happen is MJ will end up reading the whole letter that he was going to say to her, but never did. And then she'll find out the secret of Peter Parker being Spider-Man. So that'll be like the cool reveal of this movie. How eventually Mary Jane again finds out who Spider-Man is. But it's kind of lazy also. So Mary Jane goes on to figure out that Spidey is having issues with this nullifier. So she comes to find that his mask is part of the problem, that he needs to go on and figure out a way to stop his nullifier from overheating. So eventually, Spidey goes on another test run and he figures it out. So also, Peter is to come up with a way to absolutely nullify um, Jean Grey's powers. Like, it's basically the Juggernaut helmet of Deadpool and Wolverine. They're basically doing the exact same thing here with Jean Grey now, which I'm like, okay, like, we're doing the exact same freaking. Do we always have to go and do the exact same thing in every one of these Marvel films now? So, here's where I think Spidey was going on and reading the letter to Mary Jane, and he eventually is to doze off. And then Frank comes in and is like, oh, you can't sleep either? Because, yeah, Spidey's wearing his mask. How can he tell if he's sleeping or not? So, Frank comes in there, and so Spidey is talking about the nullifier, and then also Frank is starting to talk about Mary Jane and who exactly Mary Jane is to Peter. And at some point, he talks about like that, hey, isn't that your girl, and this and that. So it's like, no. So Frank eventually goes on to tell Peter, it's like, well, yeah, man, like, you need friends. Like, don't be like me. Like, nobody wants to be like me. And like, man, you gotta go on, you gotta get friends, you gotta get a woman. Like, yeah, you. So, but if anything, like, Peter was like, well, yeah, we're kind of the same. We're both loners. And like, Punisher's like, no, like, get friends. Like, get a woman. Anyway, so now here is where we have Jean Grey that is coming after Damage Control. Jean Grey has now made her way into Damage Control headquarters, and people in Damage Control have made their way into this vault, and they're trying to stay safe. So Peter goes on to find facial recognition of Jean Grey, and so he follows her to the Damage Control headquarters. So as Spidey goes on and confronts Jean Grey, we would come to find that Jean Grey is not alone, that she's come with help. She's come with the Hulk. So, because eventually there'll be a throwing onto the ground of Banner's nullifier. I'm like, oh, things are about to pick up here. So we now have Jean Grey that is taking over the mind of the Hulk, and now Hulk is now having to have a good fight with Spidey here, and MJ had to go on and talk to Frank. Talk to him and convince him to try and help out Spidey here. And so at some point, Punisher gets into the fight with Hulk, and it's kind of cool how he goes on and kind of starts gunning down Hulk and using all these explosives. And then eventually, also, the Punisher ends up accidentally getting possessed, or ends up getting Jean inside of him. And then kind of Punisher it kind of turns into the bad guy a little bit, which is kind of fun. So Punisher goes on and eventually plants all these explosives on the vault when he turns evil, because he goes on and starts looking around all over the place, and Spidey tells Punisher, "Hey, don't get within 33 feet of this girl, or otherwise she's going to possess you." And yeah, he ends up just bumping into her, and she's like, "Oh, hi," and then she takes control of him. And when she takes control of Punisher's mind, it's like, man, this guy's really weird. So so as Jean is to lose control, or is to not go on and keep control of Hulk's mind, or in this case, Banner's mind. Um, Banner goes on and is to start talking with Spidey, and he eventually transforms back into the Hulk, but this time around, Bruce is to say that the big guy is coming, so we're back to basically what is to be the reset of the original Hulk. I wish that we honestly would have gone on and gotten like maybe World Breaker Hulk, or some other kind of variation of Hulk, because yeah, like merchandise wise, why would anybody want to go on and buy specifically new merch for this Spider-Man film when there's been so many different Avengers merch of this same Hulk? Like, you're not really getting anything new. Maybe in different sizes, maybe in a slightly tweakingly different kind of, but yeah, like I'm sure there's still a number of people that went on and bought Hulk merch from this movie, because that's what some people tend to do. They just buy everything from every film, which I understand that. But yeah, it just doesn't quite make sense. This Hulk has kind of been used in like so many handful of different movies. It's not drastically that different, but whatever. So here, since Spidey has this now organic web that seems to be a lot more powerful this time around, we would have Spidey that goes on and finds the Shocker gauntlets, and is now trying to figure out a way to thrust the nullifier on the back of the neck of Hulk. And the nullifier, it seems, is not working. Spidey is desperately trying to, but it's not fitting on the back of Hulk's neck. It just won't latch on. So also Spidey's having to also try to like web the nullifier because it's falling out of his hand, and so on and so forth. So eventually what happens is that Spidey ends up going on to webbing so many pieces of rubble, and eventually at some point Hulk starts to slide down to this or through this building. And also, like, there's one moment where Hulk is grabbing on to Peter, and here is where Spidey reveals to Hulk who he really is, that he's Peter Parker. And all of a sudden, Hulk takes a moment, looks at himself in the mirror, and then is to slide down and start to eventually kind of get away from Peter. So now Punisher has gone on to completely explode the vault, and Jean and Punisher are to make their way into the vault. Spidey gets in between uh, Jean and Spidey, or Spidey ends up getting between Bill and Jean, and what happens is that Spidey ends up taking the nullifier and putting it on to Jean, and then shortly thereafter, Bill goes on and tranquilize darts Jean. Jean falls over and says the word Sarah. Immediately, no one knows what Sarah means, and so, if anything, Peter is trying to figure that out. He's like, yeah, like, I can't let that go. What has any connection with Sarah and Jean Grey? Because the more that Peter looks into Jean Grey, about how she just kind of came out of nowhere and she had been this orphan and this and that, it's like, okay, like this just doesn't quite make sense. So Spidey asks Bill about the whole Sarah thing, and Bill is to come up with this excuse that Jean was inside of Bill's mind and got the name Sarah out of his mind, but he can't give Peter any answers of why that popped in there. So eventually this will all reconnect with when eventually Spidey talks to Mary Jane. Because eventually MJ will go on and will say that she had no memory at all of the interaction of her being possessed by Jean Grey. And Peter would be like, wait a minute, if you didn't remember anything from that interaction, why is it that Bill remembered everything? That doesn't make sense. So Bill's kind of hiding something that he didn't want to tell me. So, but anyways, we get back to Peter meeting up with Mary Jane, and she's reading the letter, and Spidey takes off their mask, reveals that it's Peter Parker to Mary Jane, and then it's like, oh yeah, you were the guy at that party, that random stranger, and also, like, I saw you at the coffee, and you introduced yourself to me. Like, oh, that was a weird interaction. You were going to tell me that then? And Peter was like, yeah, I was going to tell you that then, but I just couldn't. So Mary Jane goes on and says, like, well, yeah, like it seems that you really have all these strong feelings for me, but if anything, I can't feel the same for you. I can't love you because I don't even know who you are, which is actually kind of cool. Like, it's all about like the Gamora thing from Guardians of the Galaxy, because eventually Gamora doesn't know who Star-Lord is, so they have to kind of re-fall back in love with one another. And Mary Jane is probably going to end up being probably the same exact way. Because yeah, they're gonna have to regain the love again, because you can't have these characters go on and get married and stuff like that. It has to be this off again, on again, stupid thing that we have to kind of play around again with. Because yeah, like, they have to figure out some goofy way to not have these characters always be together, because that's how they have to do stories and comic books, and like, you can't go on, you can't marry off Lois Lane and Clark Kent, because you'll just have to turn around and figure out a way to reboot the whole thing because it all of a sudden will just fall apart. It's strange. It's weird. Anyway, so Mary Jane tries to leave, but she realizes that, like, well, hey, yeah, like, if anything, she's not going to get very far. She asks Peter if he'll go on and if he'll swing her back to where her place is. So, considering Ned is a big Spider Man fan, MJ goes on and asks Peter, hey, you want to just go on and come up and meet Ned? And you don't have to tell him who you are. Like, just go on and just say I met Spider Man and we'll just take it from there. So, Peter thought like, yeah, this would actually be great. I finally get to meet Ned. So Ned goes on and explains to Peter how eventually he was the one that comes up with this Peter tracker thing, which by the end credit scene they end up going into that, which honestly just kind of says that Peter is to be off world. But yeah, like nothing is to like really be of any real use in credit scene, and it really means nothing. Like if anything, there could have been more of a teaser to Doomsday, but or if he was going to be in Doomsday, they're just kind of teasing what Peter's future interaction is going to be anywhere, and that freaking sucks. Anyways, so Peter and uh Peter and Ned here are obviously building something, I think, with probably Legos. And I'm assuming more than likely it's going to be some Star Wars ship, right? It has to be that. Or no, wait, maybe it's an AT-AT. Maybe it's one of those with like the long legs. But either way, it's a Star Wars. It has to be a Star Wars ship. It has to be. So as Peter and Ned continue to have interactions with one another, eventually MJ is to hand uh, Peter a sketch and be like, "Yeah, I think you guys would make really good best friends." And as kind of Ned is kind of walking away, so the two of them are talking. So here's where MJ talks about her time of not remembering anything at all about being possessed, and so Peter makes his way to Belova and asks about the whole Sarah and Jean Grey connection. And we come to find out that Jean Grey had a sister named Sarah Grey, and somehow Belova had that bit of information. And so we're like, oh my god. Jean Grey had an older sister, which had mutant powers also. She was to have the exact same power that Jean had. So, like, is this like a Cyclops and Havoc situation? That's kind of cool, but if also anything, it's going to mean nothing because we find out that Sarah was killed. She was looking up at the vent with V Max and she died. So, anyways, Sarah and Jean, the two of them are together at this park somewhere. Sarah's going on and showing Jean how to hop from person to person to person. And at some point, Sarah goes on and I think it's getting ice cream or something. She gets off the bench and she ends up getting a dart in the neck. She gets taken out by damage control. Jean starts to go on and starts to be like, hey, I'll go on and I'll help my sister. And Sarah's like, no, I don't want you to get captured too. So Sarah uses her power on Jean to have her walk away. And Jean then kind of gets out of it later. It's like, oh my god, Sarah, like she forced me to not help her. So Jean wakes up in a room that eventually becomes her prison cell. It's kind of like Magneto with his prison. It's kind of similar to that. Um, for how eventually they have him uh in this room that has an even further room outside of it because of course the whole 33 feet rule. So Bill is to tell Jean that she can't use her powers because of the nullifier and that she's like basically attached to this chair. So Bill gets into this sealed area that's 30 feet away from Jean because they're going to go on and they're going to turn her powers back on. So so as they go on and turn on Jean's powers, we have Spidey making his way to damage control and is talking to the guards and they won't let him in. And so Peter's like, "Oh, okay, well I guess this is how we're going to like handle things." Like, "Okay, so Spidey goes on and starts stretching. It's like, "Oh yeah, I'm not a young as spry as I used to be." So so Spidey makes quick work of all these guards, obviously starts to web them down. And then here is where Jean, like her powers are starting to evolve, and at a certain point, there's no way to shut her off. That she's too powerful. So eventually, Jean will basically turn into Xavier from Logan, or also how kind of Scarlet Witch had basically made this huge bubble of this just one area and kind of can control everything. Jean kind of does the same thing here. So she basically takes this whole psychic bubble and freezes everybody that exists in a very specific area. So everyone is to absolutely stop. Frank gets to the point to where he gets right at the cusp of the bubble and is like, okay, well, all these people are just stuck now. So Frank goes on and he sets on a rooftop because eventually he'll get this sniper rifle out because he's going to try to assassinate Jean Grey, hoping to kill her here to take her out because Jean is very powerful. So Spidey starts to make his way into damage control because, of course, he is to be immune to Jean's power. So here is where Spidey meets up with the Hand, and Jean starts to take control of the Hand because, of course, Spidey is trying to stop Jean. So here is, of course, where while Spidey is facing off against the Hand here, and eventually the Punisher is calling him while this is going on. And he's like, "I'm a little busy here, Punisher." So while the two of them are going on and talking, and Spider-Man is letting, or Punisher's letting Spider-Man know what's going on about the whole psychic bubble thing, and Peter is to kind of be aware of it because of where he is. So while Jean is controlling the Hand, she is also going on and taking Bill, strapping him to this chair, and having several shards of glass around his head, just kind of dangling around and around. It's kind of like Doctor Strange in uh is it Infinity War? Where he's going on and having all those things of glass and the one um Thanos kid, the one guy with the mind power, he does the exact same thing to Doctor Strange in that in Infinity War, right? I think that's what happens. It's kind of relaying right back to that. Like, god dang, are they doing? Can they do anything new in the MCU? Anything new, please. So So, as Peter continues to fight against the Hand, he reflects on his family and his friends, and Jean Grey finally goes on and is possessing the Hand and takes away Spidey's web shooters because that's the one thing that he has that can benefit him the best or the most. So Jean says to Spidey, it's like, it's either your Peter Parker or your Spider-Man. And here's where we get the Batman Forever thing where Peter's like, well, no, I'm both. So Peter finally decides to take the inhibitor completely off, and his eyes start to glow black. And so he completely uses his organic web to dodge all these weapons. And then he blasts this organic web that goes so hard that he is able to web up all of these Hand characters in this one big wave of webbing. And then he is trying to make his way to Jean. So Jean goes on and tells Peter, hey, yeah, like, my power is amplified and now I can invade your brain. And Peter's like, yeah, go ahead. So as Jean is to now turn into Peter into this flashback, here's the point where Aunt May is talking to Jean Grey and is talking about the whole, with great power comes great responsibility. And then Peter comes in and says to Jean, it's like, well, yeah, both of us have lost loved ones. Like, I lost my aunt, you lost your sister. Like, yeah, like, if anything, like, now we can kind of relate to one another. And so while that's going on, we have Frank Castle that's getting ready for the sniper shot. So Spidey knows that the shot is coming, so he goes on and he grabs Jean and he goes on to thrust away from the bullet shot. But what happens is Jean realizes that there's blood on her hand, and we're like, oh, don't tell me that Jean is going to be dead so soon. Like, they're just going to one off this character in this Spider-Man movie of all things? That makes no sense. But all of a sudden we come to find that the blood is actually coming from Spider-Man. Frank is like, oh my god, I just probably maybe even killed Spider-Man. This is crazy. So immediately when Spider-Man is down on the ground, I'm like, fuck, no, what? Like, don't tell me Spider-Man is going to die here. And then Tobey Maguire or some Andrew Garfield or somebody's going to be coming in to replace him. Like, that wouldn't make any sense at all. Like, we'd have a totally different Spider-Man going on and being in this MCU or Sony or so, I don't know, whatever this new world is. And like, please don't tell me that's going to happen, because that, like, what? Like, that wouldn't make a lot of sense. Killing off this character when we haven't had any of the other Spider-Man kind of inserted in this world, it doesn't make sense. There's too many loose ends. He can't die. Anyways, so the next thing we see is there's a number of Spidey fans that are outside this hospital as Frank is to rush Spidey into the hospital. So Peter is to be on this hospital bed and Jean Grey is to be nearby. So we come to find Peter is to wake up from the hospital bed. So like there's a real huge shock moment that eventually is like, oh yeah, he survived. Of course he survives. So Frank explains that Jean Grey had used her voodoo powers to keep Peter alive long enough for them to get the bullet out. Of course he can't get killed because he's Spider-Man. Just tease me with that bullshit. So Frank is to say it's like, and so he cries a little bit, like while he's talking to Peter. But anyways, so Frank is to say that, like, yeah, they cut up his suit, so it's not like he can really put up a really good escape here. But here's what they're gonna plan on doing. So Peter walks off in civilian clothes out of the hospital, and Frank Castle goes on and puts on uh, Spider-Man's gloves and mask, and is to be waving at the people outside, and everybody's to look up like, oh my god, it's Spider-Man, and they're all like praising, and they're all like saying all kinds of stuff to Spider-Man. So Peter is taking a moment to really bask in all this and looking at all the kids and everybody who's like really appreciative of Spider-Man, and that all these people have like devoted like staying out this time to just to be there for Spider-Man. It's kind of really nice. I really love this moment. Like, we can harpen back on the whole Aunt May talking about like um yeah, these people, like, man, do they really devote time to a guy that is like to tell him to hold on just a minute longer and this and that. Like that whole speech from that Spider-Man movie from before, um, the Tobey Maguire one. So so now we cut to Peter that is beyond this like this beam somewhere, and he's drinking coffee. Because I don't think I talked about the one where he's like dangling off of this one other beam, and he has his phone out. Because like we have to have a Spider-Man that really isn't scared of anything. But god dang, are these height kind of things kind of crazy? So that's going on. We also see that Jean is on some random bus somewhere. We'll probably see her in some X-Men project or Avengers thing somewhere down the road. But yeah, so after that, we then have Peter that gets flowers, makes his way to his aunt's grave, and then goes on and continues to talk to Detective DeWolf. So they're talking about Black Widow and how she's pitching in and helping them out, and Peter is to go on and talk about how there's a bank heist nearby, and DeWolf is like, how about let the cops take that? Like, if anything, give yourself a freaking break. And Peter's like, okay, like, I'll just go and let you guys handle that. And so there's several times where DeWolf is talking to Peter, and she's with her kids, and the kids would go on and say to DeWolf, like, oh my god, like, are you talking to Spider-Man? And eventually Spider-Man tells DeWolf, it's like, well, yeah, um tell your kids I said hi. So the last thing that we do in this movie is we have Peter that meets back up with Ned, and finally, as honestly, since Mary Jane knows who Spider-Man is, at this point, Peter wants a friend. So as Peter meets up with Ned, he tells him what his real name is, and then he starts to go on and have them do their magic handshake between one another. And then all of a sudden, because Ned has weirdly magical abilities because he's a wizard, Harry, all of a sudden Ned remembers who Peter is and says, Peter? Oh my god, I remember you, I guess. And and then they cut the movie there. And then we have the end credit scene where Ned is going on and looking at the spider tracker, and we find that the spider tracker is to have Peter's location unknown or is in space somewhere. It's weird. So for some odd reason, Peter's in space now. For what project? I don't know. Because if anything, the end credit scenes weren't specific enough. Either than that, I think it's time to get the heck out of here because I know that this movie was exactly this time anyways. But that's also kind of talking about credits and everything between that. I don't know. But anyways, so I'm gonna try to get a little bit out of here because this is almost the exact runtime of this movie. So thank you for watching this. I'm gonna try to get this done so this will get out today because I have to be at a rush to get this out anyways. What I'm gonna go on, I'm gonna get this out. I'm probably gonna try and maybe get another thing out, but I may just lead with just this because why not? I don't think that it's probably gonna do very well in views, but it might just do something. Either way, I hope because I have to put this out. Like I can't just go on and wait. I would love to just kind of wait because it's going out on. It's actually going to get officially released on July 31st. But if anything, I might as well release this now to try to get this out as early as I can. Plus, also like it's better to get this out to kind of beat the anyone else that is going on and waiting later to review this or whatever. But I'm sure there's a bajillion people that have already reviewed this whole thing because a lot of people had gotten private screenings and were able to watch this thing earlier than I. But yeah, so I'm gonna get out of here. Thank you for going on and watching this. If you were to have checked this out, without a doubt, I hope to do more Marvel movies in the future because I already did one already, Ghost Rider. I've done Stan Lee's Lucky Man, which is technically a Stan Lee project, which is technically a comic book project, so that'll be a thing that may or may not go on as early as I can to get hopefully a good smattering of views. I hope with that. I have no idea. I have no idea how well this one's gonna go because I'd love to at least say that it might get 100 views, but then again, who knows? It might just get 4 or none. I don't know. Like, I don't think these thumbnails or these images are really that good. And I hope I don't go on. And I hope I don't get content ID'd for any of them. I don't know. I just kind of slapped a couple images together. So, like this one, I'm kind of trying to do different kinds of thumbnails this time around than I did in the past. I don't think it's better. Like, I don't like. I think I'm kind of scratching my head and maybe thinking about probably going back to the ways I do things in the past. Just because eventually I'm very concerned how these will turn out at some point. The longer that I kind of look at them, I'm like, oh, like I think there was a lot of poor decisions made there. But I don't know. Maybe it'll be cool and interesting. Maybe people will like these better. I don't know. Either way, I'm gonna get the heck out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. Uh, Hopefully you somehow found this informative because I don't think a lot of people will probably care about reviews anymore. I don't know. For newer films. But either way, I did this one at least. So goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.